Welcome, everybody. This is John Paul Mendoza, Dr. Speak Selling, and this is Raging Verbalist number 188. For those who are new to it, welcome. Glad. Click that like, the subscribe, notifications if you want to be annoyed and bugged by this. You're a longtime viewer. Welcome back. We are on YouTube and Facebook. So check us out in Position to Win book group, Position to Win book. And we will just take it from there. With me, as always, standing in for you, asking the questions and posing the points is the ever lovely Sandra. Welcome, Sandra.
Hello, how are you doing? Are you staying cool?
Yes. It has been in the hundreds. I was just in Phoenix, and nothing like driving around and having the little thermometer say 118 degrees. It's but everybody says, well, at least it's a dry heat. Yeah. So is the inside of a pizza oven a dry heat? But that's not beside the point, right? So
that's right.
All right. So talk about a variety of subjects. We don't delve too deep into politics, but we do talk about business and anything else that might be out there that annoys me. And so what are we talking about today, Sandra? Lay it on me.
All right. So we're talking about the business moat. So what do you mean by a business moat?
Over the years, people have tried to express, all kinds of thought leaders have tried to express why some businesses are successful, but not only successful, but are really hard to compete against and overcome. And they end up with this amazing resiliency. And somewhere along the line, people, somebody came up with, I don't know who those people were, but somebody came up with the phraseology of calling it a moat. And that was based upon this idea that, you want to buy a castle and then you want to build a moat around it. So that way people can't come in and take all your stuff from your castle. So that was the kind of the metaphorical, kind of thinking about it. It was the metaphor. That's what we start thinking about it. And but it goes deeper than that, and it gets better than that. But that's where I think we start off with, and the reasons why you're going to want a moat and need a moat, and what that means, and why most businesses don't have one, frankly, and why they're vulnerable because of it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So what is the next?
All right. So isn't it true that Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger invest only when there's a moat?
I would say following those two, obviously greatest analysts, investors, whatever you want to call them, and they are geniuses at picking this thing out. And they talk a lot about having a business that has a moat and why that's important, and why they only want to invest in businesses that have a moat. It doesn't mean that that every business is perfect that they buy, but by having a moat, it means that it is much harder for competitors to take advantage of you, and more importantly, to unseat you and then effectively drive you out of business. So they have discussed that with great detail. An example of a business that they are heavily involved in is Coca-Cola. You may have heard of that company, and they're huge shareholders because they believe that Coca-Cola has a moat. They believe it has a unique formula. If you ever read the book Positioning the Battle for Your Mind, highly recommended, by the way, by Reeves and Trout, what they do is they talk about how Coca-Cola has been attacked by Pepsi-Cola and others, but Pepsi is the big brand. And Pepsi for years has been selling their product at significantly lower margins, attempting to get parity and overtake Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola still remains, all these many decades later, as the top dog, the number one in the marketplace. And that's because they have a moat, and their moat is how they operate their businesses, how they deliver their products, and how that takes place. So, I believe everything that Charlie and Warren do is to say, let's look at a business, but somewhere in the analysis, let's figure out what is their moat, and is their moat big enough, deep enough, and sustainable?
And what are some examples of businesses that have created and maintained a moat?
Well, the two businesses that come to mind today is Apple and Tesla. And we're going to examine each one kind of individually, but Apple and Tesla have figured out how in consumer electronics for Apple, how to turn their products into a premium brand how to charge a premium amount, and how to go out there and continuously get great customer loyalty. And they built a moat over a period of time, being counter to so many analysts who said, let's open things up. My favorite example is that Steve Jobs gets booted out. People, our various management structures come in. Eventually, the board kicks those losers out, I guess we could say, because they weren't doing as well. They bring Steve back in, and what was the first thing Steve did is that he went back and eliminated the bridges that were going over the moat. And the bridge that Steve Jobs eliminated was the fact that he went out and said, we're not going to license our technology anymore. We're going to go back to our knitting. All I can tell you is I was buying Macs at that point in time for businesses. I wish I had bought the shares at $3.50 a share. I probably wouldn't be on here right now, but it was, that was just an example of where, Apple did that. And, but we're going to go deeper and dive in there. But to me, both of those are modern examples of companies that, out of sheer effort and planning and things that they did, actions they've taken. It's not something that you can put on a laminated card, put up posters, hand this out to people. It's not a slogan. So it's not sloganeering, as I like to call it. It's reality. It's something that's tangible that you see every day when they do business.
And can you give me an example of Apple's moat they've created?
So the moat that they've created is that they have an entire ecosystem. And that means that if you own an iPhone, you own an iPad, you own a Macintosh computer, now they've got their big giant goggles that we're going to be talking about in the near future. But everything interacts and works with each other. And because of it, Apple has now created this ecosystem, which is a moat. And for those of you who are not in that world, all I can tell you is, and yes, I live in multiple worlds, right? I have iPhones, I have Android phones, I have, an iPad, I've got a Samsung tablet, I've got PCs, I've got Macs. I'm going to just tell you right now, the fact that in 2023, I can't attach my phone to my laptop, to my Windows laptop with ease and allow it to go back and forth is nuts, is ridiculous. And if you think that it's better, you go, well, John, but if you had an Android phone, you can do it. Yeah, well, buy this Dell laptop that I'm using right now, and it says you can use Dell Connect and connect your Android device, and it's going to be, as the Brits would say, tickety-boo and work fantastically. And guess what happened? Well, Dell quit supporting Dell Connect. And they said, well, you got to go out and find another solution. And so what Apple has done is they've created an ecosystem in which you can share data, share things back and forth, because it turns out the ability to move data around supplants just about everything else. So Apple, having built that, having worked through that, having to make sure that that works almost seamlessly, means that their moat is very much in place and sustainable. Does it mean that everybody is going to ever move to it? Probably not. However, as we're recording this, listening to the financial news, and they were talking about how many of the stocks that are out there, that the Nifty 7 or whatever they're called, Apple is just like keeps going up and up and up, and part of it is this whole ecosystem. Now, if you want to create something like that for your own business, if you want to figure out how that you are going to have those kinds of potential things going on, I may have part of the solution. It may be the total solution, but I have part of it. And what I'm going to tell you about is that you should seriously consider getting this book. Most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize the position to win. We wrote this book. My partner and I, my co-conspirator, Gabe Batista, and I wrote this book for a very important reason. And that is that most businesses never think in terms of that. They're opportunistic. Who doesn't want to be an opportunistic entrepreneur? But because of that, what they do is they make a mistake. And the mistake they make is that they don't think about, how do I build in things that I can do that my customer doesn't do? Now, we could call a moat something else. We could call it a unique selling proposition. Thank you, Rasa Reeves. We could call it a positioning exercise. We could do that. But most of the time, what we don't do is we don't seriously think about how we build it. I believe that the elements of a moat is a great way to think about it and make it very hard for people to beat you. So that means that book is available physically at positiontowinbook.com, positiontowinbook.com. And you can go there and ask for me to autograph it, and I'll be happy to do that. Also, you can go to Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, wherever books are sold, and get a physical copy if you so desire. And it's available on all the digital formats, Kindle, Nook, and Apple iBooks. On the other side is that if you're doing remote work, which is what a lot of people are doing now, do it right. In fact, we wrote a book, and I still believe it's very valid. We did it during the kickoff of the pandemic, the global catastrophe. And all I'm going to tell you is there's a lot of people who do it wrong. And finally, if you're in a market and you want to get a little bit of that Raging Verbalist rage, go out there and pick up your Raging Verbalist mug. And it means that everything that you have in this mug tastes just a little bit better, has a little bit of a bite, a little bit of a push, a little bit of a jump. So, Sandra, talk to me. What's the next thing that we've got to go through? Lay it on me.
All right. So now can you explain Tesla's moat?
So Tesla's moat is an interesting twist and a spin. For those of you who are not aware of the fact that when Elon Musk got involved in Tesla, Tesla already existed as a company. And a lot of people think that he founded it. He did not. He was a major investor, but he has since taken over, and he is the driving visionary force. And early on, I think he realized that if you didn't have a place to charge your car, you weren't going to be able to drive your car, which, having watched people struggle to charge in cars, because again, I've been doing research on EVs and whether EVs are reality or not. In fact, I've rented an EV this week, a Tesla, and I can tell you that the moat that Tesla created, so I don't know if he started thinking of it as a moat, but it has turned into one, is the fact that there's this supercharger network that exists. So that means that I could do a business trip, because this week was a test. We'll be doing a future episode about it. But I actually did a test where I drove from Southern California to Phoenix, drove all over Phoenix, did all the business I had to do, and then drove back. And I wanted to see if I could do it purely on electric, and could I live with range anxiety and what this thing was going to be about. I wasn't trying to do high mileaging, whatever that version would be for an EV or any of that. But that supercharger network meant that every time I pulled into one, I did not pull into a single one of those supercharger locations without seeing other Tesla owners. And for the most part, everybody was talking about how, yes, they've altered their life on how they're using the car or the SUV or whatever version they had. But I can tell you that has become a moat. And because of that, Tesla is, I think, going to continue to have a dominant position in the marketplace, because getting the damn thing charged turns out to be a big thing. If you're one of those people who has a YouTube, fanboy Tesla thing and say, well, I charge it at night and then I drive 12 miles to work and you could use a motorized skateboard for heaven's sake. I'm talking about serious driving. Now, did it mean that it took me a mindset shift? Absolutely, because you're talking to somebody who, I have driven lots of miles in one day, drove from Denver, Colorado to Southern California in my Mercedes, woke up and said, hey, my business is done, I'm going home. And in 14 and 3/4 hours later, I was in my driveway. And I can tell you, I could not have done that with a Tesla as it's set up today. Could I have gotten it approximately or close? Maybe, because just the amount of time it takes to charge it. But I believe that their moat that they've created for a piece of it, a big piece of it, is by having the supercharger network. And the guy started building it long before he had enough cars to use it. So that is a vision that you have to have. Part of building a moat is doing things, and maybe you do what some people have said to me, John, you're making things too complicated. Sometimes to build a moat, you have to do many more steps. So you build in I always like to think of it as landmines and tank traps, so we can use the moat also. is to stop your competitors because they can't do it. Whatever they can't do or won't be able to do. By the way, at one of the places that I charged up in Phoenix is that there were two charge point, or actually 4 charge point stations. And I asked this guy who was there, I said, have you ever seen anybody charge? And he goes, yeah, but it doesn't work very well. That's a big key. So if EVs are going to be a deal, Tesla definitely has a moat.
And what are some of the steps of creating your own moat?
I'm going to give you 3 overarching things. Number one is you want to find out, what does the market expect to happen when you deliver your product or service or whatever you do? What is that kind of traditional baseline of what people do? So because you want to have a base, you want to have that baseline. What is the market expect? The next thing that you have to ask yourself, what can we do to make the service better, faster, easier, less friction, less hassle? What are some of the things that we might do? More completeness, a better outcome. How do we do that? So the second step is, what are some of the things we can add on and how we can lay it out? And the third step is integrating those extra elements, integrating those other pieces that your competitors won't do or can't do or refuse to do, because that becomes a big deal. Does that mean that you're going to get 100% market share? No, but what it means is that for the customers who do business with you, they will have a decidedly different view of what that transaction was like and why that transaction worked for them. And more importantly, their recommendation to friends of what is going to happen. I've seen it in countless businesses that I have done turnarounds on. Those who will accept it and go from the before, the fat, pudgy, not very in good shape, lousy customer service, to the other side, makes a huge difference. Had a client who was involved in a project, this is a tech business, and they were struggling at this project. And they brought me in to see if I could save the deal, if you will, because it was worth millions of dollars. Went in and I asked the buyer, the contracts guys, so what's our vendor rating? Or what's your vendor rating system and where do we stack up? No one at my client's company had ever asked that question, even though they had been engaged in this project for several years. And he said, well, John, frankly, anybody who's below is at 70% and above we'll do business with, but we're a little concerned. Anybody below 70% to basically 60%, that's the yellow, the almost danger thing. We got to do a get well program. And anything below 60%, we just, we can't do business. Now, because of the unique type of technology that my client was selling, they were kind of wedged in there. And I said, so can you tell me, giving your rating system, where they fit? And he goes, well, I can tell you where they fit, is that they have a 37% rating. And how you get a 37% rating is being really lousy. In the course of a year of working on that account for my client and doing the simple things that needed to be done, paying attention to the details, we went from 37% to almost 75%. We didn't quite hit 75% in 1 year. And of course, it meant more business. The reality is that moat was being created based upon doing the little things. Oftentimes people want to know, well, what's that big, give me that big thing we could do that gives me that wow factor. Well, if you only have the wow, but you don't have the supporting pieces, you're not going to be there and you're not going to get there for long.
And how do positioning and the moat intersect?
So it's interesting because the concept of positioning is, what is the perspective? What is the mindset bias perspective of the customer, and what do they think you are and how you interact with them? So their bias is what they believe is to be true and correct in all of those things. And the moat intersects because what happens is, and this is the failure point. By the way, if you want to know why businesses fail in the first 5 minutes, is that they do not have a position that they can actually articulate. Because you have to have a position you can articulate, And what the moat is a manifestation of that articulation. So the moat and positioning are tied together. And I would wrap it all up in a bow and say unique selling proposition, because all three of those are part of the same. The reason why something works is that it has a place in the market, a place in the minds and the hearts of potential customers and prospects. And more importantly, that moat is that you deliver something that others cannot do, which is what a USP is about, but you own a position, and that position is real and almost impossible to unseat.
And how do you use a moat to your best advantage?
It is so important that you train every person in your organization, every person in your food chain, and I'm talking about your vendors, your suppliers, your partners, anyone that interacts with you. You have to deliver the story. You have to continuously tell people, this is who we are, this is how we do what we do, and this is how we explain it. And that story should be explained over and over and over and over again. And then you need to be able to not only say it, not only talk about it, but what you want to do is not just tell people, you want to show them. You want to show them through your absolute actions. You want to make sure that they see this and that they understand that it works and that it does deliver on results that they couldn't get any other way. If, in fact, you do that, if, in fact, you deliver on those promises day in and day out, you will invariably start to build your moat. Now, do not be surprised when your competitors say, me too. Yeah, we do that too. Me too. Yeah, we do that too. See if, in fact, they actually do it. Force them to step up. Most of the time, they are poor imitators and not anywhere near capable of demonstrating this, which is why you should always push this forward and never rest on your laurels. Make sure that you always add to it, because here's what you need to know. A moat has to not just, you don't just go and dig it and fill it up with water and you're done. You have to maintain it. You have to continue to grow it. You have to continue to build it. You have to continue to move it along. Back to Tesla. The fact that Tesla has a unique plug that goes into their cars. And now you have companies starting to move in that direction. Ford and GM and Volvo and others, Rivian, all of them are signing up to the moat. All of them are signing up to that. And Tesla's going to know who all of those people are. And I can guarantee you, Elon Musk will find a way to utilize that data. So the moat is not only going to pay off in them selling cars, but selling other ancillary services and all of those other things. The most important thing about your moat is that if it is your best feature, your best capability, is that you have to constantly say it, remind people, drive it home, because oftentimes we get bored with our own story because we've heard it enough times. Best performers, I'm talking about people who are artistically, musically out there, the best performers are those who understand that today's audience, tonight's audience, may have never seen you live, may have never really understood the magic of being in the same room with you, and that you don't just mail it in, but that performance as if it was the very first time, the strongest performance. Always put that best, strongest performance out there every time. And what will happen is that that moat will be an advantage, it'll be leverage, and more importantly, it'll put you in a much better competitive position in these dynamic, changing times. And with that, I just want to thank you for joining us. I'm John Paul Mendoza, Dr. Speed Selling, and for the ever lovely Sandra, this has been Raging Verbalist number 188. Come back and join us next week. And always remember one thing. You can go out to the market, and if you are unique and you are special and you have something that's desirable, you have an opportunity to create a moat and build a sustainable business.